Responsible AI in Action with host Charles Demoff, CMO, kama.ai, and guest Mark Cosyn, VP Business Development, kama.ai.
Welcome to Responsible AI in Action. I'm your host, Charles Demoff. I am the CMO of kama.ai, the leading company in responsible AI technology. This is the Responsible AI in Action podcast or videocast series. We are speaking with leaders in the AI industry about the latest developments, the challenges, the solutions in today's AI systems. And we try to keep it short. So it's around a 15 to 20 minute interview. And with me today on that point is Mark Cosyn. He is the Vice President of Business Development and Strategic Partnerships at kama.ai. Welcome, Mark. And Mark, let me jump right in and start asking you a question. So Mark, start us off a little bit by telling us a little bit about yourself, your role at kama.ai.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. Thank you. So kama.ai was founded before the current wave of generative AI back in about 2018. I had known Brian Ritchie, the founder and CEO of kama.ai, for many years. Brian had looked at ways to create a graph approach to AI that can really capture contextual values, right? The values related to something humans want to achieve, right? And back at that point, many of the systems, Google, BERT, others, all of them were very deterministic, not with the probabilistic approaches that generative AI takes today. Fast forward many years, I was on the board, and in 2022 decided to join as seeing the opportunity of AI, but also the work I've been doing as a CIO in automation and data. Just saw really the approach that Kama had, which is, I think, a very simple and direct approach to governance of responsible AI is a very unique one, and one that we could help move forward. A bit more about my background as well. I'd worked in the architecture, engineering, construction industry, had been the focus of my work. And it's a very process-driven industry with a lot of regulatory controls, right? And also a lot of, almost on every project you get, you have groups of experts come together to address multiple processes or aspects of infrastructure engineering. And I realized that these experts are teachers in all parts of our lives, right? And they're always in short supply. So again, this aspect of what Kama had worked on, and the problems that Brian and I both saw in implementation and delivery of major projects or processes that companies, organizations want to achieve, is something that we could help with. And I think we're there. I'll talk later on about one of our favorite projects we kick things off with too.
Okay, that's great. Excellent. Well, thank you, Mark, for that introduction. So, Mark, let me start you off a little bit. Let's call it simple. So the first question on my mind, since you kind of talked a little bit about governance, is what does human in the loop, that term, actually mean in practice for the enterprise, for example?
What's it? Because human in the loop to date has related to the ways humans train models, right? So trying to have humans come in and teach models what to do. And I think it's at the scale AI, very big organization. That's exactly what they do. They hire people to sit and retrain models and then release the models. And this is important by industry, by context. But again, we're trying to, and when I say we, I'm talking about the industry as a whole, train better models, but they only go so far. So our approach to human in the loop would be one of, well, why don't we just connect the people and give the people that involved in a specific project or a specific process and organization a way to continually contribute. And so this is more of a human and AI partnership that we approach, rather than humans just trying to put AI in front all the time. We see it as much more of a hybrid and a balanced approach, that you should always be able to go back to the experts who put together the information that we're using. So I think that's what interests me again about kama.ai, that the traditional approach to human in the loop, while valuable, it needs to be one end of the spectrum. How are we looking at training completely automated models? And in this, I'll tie in a bit here. Kama and Brian Ritchie, the CEO, is involved with the Vector Institute for AI. They just published their approaches to responsible governance of generative AI in May 2025. And Brian was one of the collaborators with the group that put that framework together, which is available now freely online. And it's suffice to say that it began as a governance framework. I think finding ways to simplify adopting that are very important. They talk at many points of every organization needing to create its own guidebook and its own approach and
Yes.
understanding what the different stakeholders are. So when we look at Kama, and the first thing we look at identifying are knowledge assets. So
Mhm.
those knowledge assets are also the key people who are in senior or mid management that are actually creating the knowledge and the ways the company is or the organization is supposed to operate.
Mhm.
And then these we want to keep attached, and we can look at what they consider risk and creating a risk register. So if at one end of the spectrum, we talk about human in the loop being training fully autonomous models as the holy grail, we see that to create a risk register, and I'll go back to my background in infrastructure engineering and management and portfolio management.
Yeah.
We would always create risk registers in engineering, right? What are the things that are a concern about a certain process? And is it a higher risk or a lower risk? So, I see things in for fully agentic, are parts available, delivery schedules. There are many
Mm.
valuable things that I think we can start to do in fully agentic with human in the loop and building industry specific trained models. And these things are very important. But to also take a look at, well, where would we not want to use AI or to build a hybrid because they're higher risk?
Right.
These are very
Right.
regulated processes or even a piece of a process and make it really simple going, well, that's really, it could be determined a frequently asked question, a high sensitive utterance, a piece of a process. We'll have instructions and relationships that someone has taught on it or written the policy procedure on it. So to be able to create these at the beginning, when we look at knowledge assets, we look at the organization or its consultants, its advisors who ultimately created the processes and knowledge in order to deliver something and to attach those. So it doesn't have to be everything. I think organizations really need a new way of simplifying governance by implementing a tool like a spectrum approach, right? And this is listed off in the Vector Institute guide. Companies need to create
Mm.
their own guidelines and governance playbooks. And a lot of the great approaches and information in that guide, if you consider it though, how do we make it simpler, right? Which is what Kama
Yeah.
is about,
Yeah.
right? How do we
Yep.
start still using the tool? So, with Kama, you're able to pick any model, right? We're not training our own models. We're looking at saying, okay,
Mhm.
in a given
Mhm.
process, we have knowledge assets that are the people. We have documents they might have created or ways of doing things.
Right.
And then
Right.
you might have one of a number of best of breed AI models or technologies. And there are hundreds of thousands of them out right now with more and more point solutions. And some of them, a lot of them are very excellent tools. But always, if you can take a look at it and say the tool only goes so far, right? And stop trying to
Mhm.
blanket approach, we're just going to fully
Mhm.
automate everything and say that
Mhm.
we need to look at where is it worth connecting the humans into processes because they are these highly regulated or governed processes. So this is human in the loop to date, and I think this is where Kama has just, I think in this last quarter, talked about our announcements with hybrid AI, why our term of hybrid AI, human and AI connection. It's not about running AIs in the cloud and on-prem, which is the definition. It's really this human AI
Yes. Good
hybrid
point. Right.
that we're defining that as, and in a risk management and governance perspective, in a simple and easy to adopt way. It's a very low cost way to start having visibility into what models are used related to what process and who and what are the knowledge assets. Which I've had many years in documents and data and information management, and there's a lot of challenges even today in many organizations about the document repositories,
Yes.
SharePoint,
Yes. Yep.
Microsoft or that, right? So how do we start picking out what are the highest value
Mhm.
processes for an AI to deliver? And there's lots of work done
Mhm.
on use
Mhm.
cases. Then
Mhm.
also say, well, then how can we quickly make sure that those processes, those use cases are governed? And it's a great way where Kama doesn't compete with the industry. We're actually very much complemented and try and fill off that final piece of how do we make the governance then if we've got a use case and a process that is one of value. Some of them are, like I said, pretty direct. We can use an off-the-shelf agentic workflow, like our SKUs, our
Yep.
parts in. I mean,
Yep.
it's a very
Yep.
fixed, it is or it isn't. The data for that is very absolute. But if we pick something like retraining someone in healthcare. Or I'll mention the maybe the human in the loop project that I liked so much that kicked this off was one with what's called the digital superclusters in Canada.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes. I remember that. Yep.
yeah, which are, I think, Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal. They have three of them, and these are centers of excellence where they get applications every year to fund projects that have a real impact, right, and that can be replicated. So we had been introduced through Gartner Research to a group
Hmm.
at the time called
Hmm.
RISO CMI, Center for Mobilizing
Hmm.
Innovation. These are actually a group out of UBC,
Yeah.
nonprofit,
Right.
right, out of the Applied Sciences faculty who were very involved in the challenge of putting in place community water systems for small communities across Canada that currently don't have safe drinking water. And there's actually about 4,000 communities still in Canada. These can
Mm.
be 100 to 500 person communities. There's funding
Right.
to address this.
Right. Right.
The challenge they had, it was one of not having subject matter experts that they trusted to be able to say, how do we, again, deliver a process where we have a need, there's funding,
Yes.
but
Yes.
the individuals in administration in those communities wouldn't know how to address working with engineers, working with the manufacturers, and then also maintaining a modern water system. If you're going from drinking out of a river or a well system, there's no maintenance certification, any of this. But there have been many communities that have done this very successfully. And the key
Mm.
was experienced water systems operators. They were some
Hmm.
of the other communities trusted. They would look and say, oh, well, what has a community we know done? And the challenge, though, was there weren't enough water systems operators who were experienced to help train and facilitate this for 4,000 communities in Canada.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
what Roseau CMI, which is now called communitycircle.org,
Hmm.
because it very much is a community circle, and it goes right back to the practice of engineering. Every project that we would do in AEC for industry, you have to bring together multiple disciplines of people into a circle to deliver anything from an oil and gas pipeline to a road to buildings and infrastructure and hospitals. It all takes a community of people to come together, each with their own disciplines, to deliver it. So on a very large scale, that was always it. So this was very resonating with me, and that the key thing that was holding us up was this lack of trust in how to bring together the group and the need to have a subject matter expert. Well, this is a human in the loop, and they were doing it very manually. And when Gartner Research had seen what we were doing with our approach to actually using real humans and partnering it
Hmm.
with AI, they said, well, this is very unique. And they introduced us to the UBC
Yeah.
CMI group.
Excellent.
And this is where we got the funding from the Digital Supercluster, together with another group, Transform Interactive, which did learning visualizations in 3D and that as well. But so this is what, to me, it was very much a reference I always talk about with, in any use case for AI and people, there will be areas where I like to think there's an area of trust
Yep.
that needs to
Hmm.
be created.
Hmm. Hmm.
An area of governance is spoken of more and more. And this actually lets us move ahead with achieving the outcomes we want through partnering humans and AI in organizations more quickly. So now there is, and I think it's just a progression of the frameworks that have been available. I mean, we looked at and there's some very good ones like the Lang chains that have come out, or Neo4j's, or we're learning that AI there's an ecosystem of tools that organizations will need, just like we had microservices and service-oriented architecture before. But to be able to say that, well, Kama is just one more of those frameworks, and it's a
Okay.
very easily implemented framework for adding in this area of
Hmm.
human in the loop governance to your critical processes, the critical areas of any process, really.
So on that point, you kind of talked a little bit about agentic AI. That's certainly kind of one of the hot things right now on the market, AI agents, et cetera. So clearly companies are trying to they're chasing more and more automation. I mean, that's the holy grail, right? We want to automate as much as possible, and that's good because that increases productivity, that boosts my capabilities of the individuals in my company to be able to achieve more, et cetera. That's great. So in that type of an environment, why do you still think that human oversight is important, or actually not important, essential for companies when they're trying to bring on AI agents, for example?
I would look at the companies that have implemented very good human control systems to date. I could go back to the Toyota production system, right? That anyone who's had to struggle through an MBA is always referenced, where they kind of led the world in lean and their approach to total
Yes.
quality management.
Yeah.
It's always okay to start. So very, very world leading at processes and process quality. But it was, of course, that was
Yes.
done in the 80s, I think it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Started this,
Exactly.
but it was all human centric at that time, right? We weren't talking about
It
AI.
was.
And I think organizations need to be honest with themselves about their state of business process management. Do they have documented processes? Do they regularly review their controls? Some industries like healthcare and others are very regulated in this, right? And very good at
Hmm.
it. And I
Hmm.
mentioned Toyota in automotive as well. Like quality is an issue. So I see this as in two ways. One is just very practically. If you're talking about using agentic, do you have, which is fully automated, do you have quality processes to begin with? Are
Mm.
they, again, back to that spectrum, ones that fit with maybe improving quality,
Yeah.
like parts ordering, or what is the delivery schedule? Are things on
Yeah.
schedule? Those are very ones and zeros based, right? They either are or they
Mhm.
aren't. So I think that on the other side is highly contextual processes to roll out, where you might have site conditions, or different combinations of vendors or people who haven't worked together before. So I think that how companies govern those
Mm.
in their practice today will have an impact on how well we could ever get to fully using trained models, right? Because no two companies are the same, even in the same industry. I mean, that's how we
Yes, that's
inherently
true. Yeah.
and how we
Hmm.
inherently compete, right? We try and have variation in what you get for the quality of the value that a company creates, and why you work with it, or why you do business with it. So there's always this contextual nuancing, right, of what companies' processes are about and why we
Mm.
choose one over the other. So as far as will we get to fully trained models, I think there will always be a need, one, like I say, practically, about how efficient are the processes. But there might also be ways that, I think, situations where I would just naturally feel better that a human is still attached to a highly governed or
Hmm.
highly risked process, where I know that,
Yes.
this is the
Yes.
canvas piece, that you can thumbs down feedback. In fact, feedback is an important piece that listed for the Vector Institute's
Hmm.
framework as well. How do we keep the models relevant or ask questions?
Yes.
So if
That
we
makes
create
sense.
these partnerships in the high risk areas, I
Yeah.
think that would always give trust, that, I can always say, I don't trust what the AI is saying, but I can, and this is Canva's hybrid approach, I can now chat and give comments right back to the people who wrote it. So,
Yeah.
because, and again,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the first thing we think about. What are the knowledge assets? And
Right.
we include humans in the
Right.
knowledge
Right.
assets, because at the end of the day, they either wrote or hired someone to write, or hired an advisory group to write the materials and paid for it. They're the owners, and this goes back to those document and data management, right? Who owns what in an organization, that they need to be responsible for it. So this goes back to some very long-standing principles about data governance and document governance. I think the thing with, I know the approach to agentic, though, is because it's a real-time technology, and it can action whole chains or sequences of processes and tasks, that it's more sensitive than data or documents, which a human's going to do something and find out later. But if the agentic world goes off the rails and does a number of tasks, and acts that are wrong. In fact, if I can, Charles, you shared that stat from Gartner just today, that with the growth of agentic, was there a 150 billion? That
150 billion. Yeah.
that's what the mistakes that just AI will do, because it,
Yep.
it, it doesn't have those controls, and maybe by 2030 or something like that, to quote it. But that was
Yeah. It is 28, 2028 or 2030. You're right. Yeah.
2028.
Yeah. Which is
Yeah.
quite interesting. And that actually does sort of emphasize the I guess the stakes on the table, which is interesting, because that leads to a little bit about my next question. I mean, being a marketing guy, so one of the things from my perspective, I'm always thinking about, well, marketing, of course, and what is my brand trust out there in the market and stuff. So from everything you've kind of talked about, you've talked about governance, you've talked about, the fact that we've got these AI agents kind of come, or rather AI agents and agentic AI, which is kind of on the rise now. So my next question is really kind of, talk to me a little bit about how does this, how do we approach brand integrity, for example. So if I've got an AI engine right behind my chatbot on my website, is this important? How do we deal with that, first of all? But then the second thing is it really that important or is this really seriously high stakes conversations?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And what is a high stakes conversation? And I think that's what we need to define organizations. So again, you go back to tried and true practices where you look at things like enterprise architecture, which are, what are the departments in an
Mhm.
organization?
Right.
What are the critical processes that the organization and those departments are part of? Are we using agentic AI or chat to train
Hmm.
people? Are we using it
Hmm.
internally? Are we putting it on our website? And even then, what topics on a website? Websites have, even the public facing ones, many different aspects. Am I logging in to get advice? Is it just general advice to the public?
Yeah.
Going on a municipal website to ask about the bus schedule, and well, there you go. I give an example of schedules before, right? So these
Yeah.
are, to me, is it lower risk or higher risk, right?
Yeah.
Again, with brand integrity, and that's where I think you need to say, as an organization, that we're early in the adoption of chat for simple things. Or I think that there are organizations who have found out already the hard way that if they push this too far, I can't recall exactly the company. Again, this is all just in the last week or two. There's so many articles
Hmm.
now, almost
Hmm.
every day, and it was on an organization now hiring back their employees. They had actually let go of a whole number of them.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I shared this one. I just can't remember the name
Yes.
of it. And hiring them back because they realized that their brand integrity, the way they were doing things, they need the people to do it. So I would say it's critical to brand integrity that they don't push agentic or automation technologies too far until it comes back to quality, right? And that example with Toad or others, you can push speed, but if you don't think about quality and governance, and so I'll come back to why I liked the approach of Kama so much is we got to keep it simple, right? It really goes back to,
Hmm.
if we just
Hmm.
can attach, it's people helping people, and now we're going to
Yeah.
interject AI tools so AI can help people better.
Yeah.
But so we realize that there is this spectrum related to almost every process. Can it be highly automated? And what are the
Hmm.
pieces of
Hmm.
it that might need to have the Gamma as a plugin to go, yeah, but this conversation we need to treat a different way. And so part of our web architecture, how we think about our
Right.
organization,
Right.
how we think about our applications, which falls to which end of the spectrum, right? Where do we need to plug? And now we do have a tool, which is Gamma, and we're actually literally just releasing a lot of these tools, learning from our work, going back to things like Community Circle and how to improve, creating these knowledge asset loops, which are people,
Yeah. Yep.
information, and context of what they're trying to achieve. Which I'll go back to, really relates to the Vector Institute paper as well. And is it industry specific that you already have people in organizations that you talk to? I think that brand impact is a real outcome to when we talk about using it
Hmm.
across the organization, right?
Hmm.
As a real
Hmm. Yeah.
strategic piece versus, well, we put a chat on our website to let you ask questions.
Yep.
We were all familiar with the frustrations of those, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good. Some interesting things to think about. And I kind of liked what you're saying about risk profiling. And the interesting thing is, it, it's kind of funny because it crosses my mind that I've also seen lots of stats out there about the failure rate of AI implementations in enterprises and such. And honestly, I believe it's probably because a lot of people aren't, one thinks about, oh, well, heck, we could all use ChatGPT easy enough. That's great. Or Gemini or whichever one you're using. And it's easy to think, well, yeah, this can't be that hard. I mean, sure, just get some more AI into our enterprises, put in, a couple of processes, and away we go. And yet, what you're kind of talking about is actually there's a lot more to it. There's, kind of thinking about what's the risk profile. Can we afford for the AI to make an error? Like, we talked about the error rates, about the new cognitive disorders that Gartner had identified. I
Mhm.
think about 11 or so, and that's going to cost 150 billion by 2028 or 2030. So again, big risks. Or is this one of those areas where it's not really that important? In which case, yeah, maybe you can tolerate more risk, which is good.
Mhm.
So that kind of leads into the next question. Or rather, one of the ideas that I had in my mind was just thinking, that's interesting. So we've been talking about governance in AI. We've been talking about human in the loop very specifically, and where do the humans kind of fit in? And kind of I want you to look ahead a little bit. So looking ahead, do you think that human in the loop is this a permanent thing? Is that a permanent requirement? Or is that more just during this transition period until AI becomes mature? Do you think that we're going to always have a need for humans to kind of provide guidance and say, hey, this is the right thing? Or will the AI kind of do that on its own soon enough?
It's a great question. I think so certainly now, because you talk, there's many comments that agentic AI and other things are still years away, and this is by industry
Mhm.
experts and that as well
Yes.
to be really effective. So I think now it has a very practical, wide application, right, to
Yeah.
risk management
Yeah.
for these simple tools. I think that you will get to a point though, and I will say it will always be there, but it will become a luxury. Like I think that for higher paying people, I would like to have a real human, and
Mhm.
it could be we're making some of the experts in the field more accessible
Yes.
by, I've worked in
Yes.
digital twin for infrastructure, and this becomes really looking at then how can we, not that we're creating avatars, but we're creating loops where, yeah, I would pay more for the perspective of the leading engineer about whether it be water or health science in my field,
Mhm.
to know that they're
Mhm.
actually part of the AI that's serving me.
Mhm.
So I think we might see even an economic opportunity where the humans in the loop and the way that we can enable that become highly sought after, because now you're getting again the
Mhm.
best of both worlds in that hybrid, and you're able to brand that, yeah, this a certain process, we're using the efficiencies of the agentic, but you realize these top five experts are the ones that put things into it, and if you ever stump it,
Yes.
they're
Yes.
the ones that are going to actually address your problem. Now, normally those people would be very high paid and very hard to get to, but because also they don't have to answer everything all the time, it's a win-win on both sides. So I
Yeah.
do see
Hmm.
the need and the role of human in the loop evolving, and again about
Hmm.
where we can be widely beneficial now, but also very tailored into the types of humans and human knowledge and wisdom input that can be provided. And I think that will always be something that's sought after.
That is a really, really good perspective. I mean, I certainly like it a lot. In fact, I can envision a world where we have, maybe it's sort of what you have with Amazon, for example, or maybe
Mhm.
you have a premium Amazon offering, or you've signed up to Prime or maybe Prime Plus or something like that.
Mhm.
And in which case, yes, your basic is that the AI just answers your question, but the next level up is that it's AI and a human, or maybe just a
Correct.
human. It's funny because it reminds me very much of once upon a time when TV came out in color. The thought was, why would anybody go to the theater anymore? And yet today, yeah, we have movie theaters, we've got
Mhm.
TV, and you go periodically to the theater to actually see live plays or live musicals and stuff. And frankly, we pay a premium to go watch those, right? So you're right. Actually, that's a really, really interesting point that maybe the human becomes that premium if you
We,
actually want
we
to
we
speak
do,
to
yeah.
the
And you think
expert.
about conferences, people still want to go to human conferences and attend them,
Hmm.
and it's always so that they can hear
You're right.
experts in their field talk and
Yeah.
hopefully build some connections with, people I want to meet when I go to a conference and learn from them and stay connected to them. So I think this ability to enhance the human networks, the way we
Hmm.
network as humans and our connections, but then to be able to say, and yes, you can be part of a project I work on or learn from it, and it actually has my particular values of how I would teach and approach, whether it be an engineering or a healthcare project. There's any discipline really, any
Hmm.
domain of knowledge. There are always many people, like regionally, internationally, that we can start tying into this and attaching them. So I do think that it has a lot as it becomes a way of doing things, human in the loop by attaching human systems, actually the humans themselves, not just training the models to replace
Yes.
them entirely. And I think that this hybrid that Kama is trying to lead is going to be a very beneficial, both in getting the economic automation wins, but also with in building the trust and accessibility to communities and experts of humans that we all admire and want to learn from.
Okay. Excellent. Well, with that, Mark, I thank you very much actually for joining me
Oh,
and for chatting with me about this subject. This has been absolutely fascinating. Some really, really interesting possibilities for the future. Again, let me just remind that Mark is the Vice President of Business Development and Strategic Partnerships at kama.ai, and kama.ai is the leader in responsible AI technologies. So the other thing that I'll kind of mention to everybody, please do stay tuned. The next episode, we will be speaking with Gabriel Carrillo. We're going to be talking about his new book, which he just came out recently, less than about 2-3 weeks ago, on AI technologies, which is called AI in Your Hands. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the book, some of the insights and perspectives that Gabriel brings to the table. So see you next time on Responsible AI in Action. And again, thank you, Mark.